The ground is moving, not shaking like a truck passing by. Moving. The earth beneath your feet, the one thing in the universe you have always trusted to stay still, is alive. Trees are swaying with no wind. The river is running backward. Rocks that have not moved in 1,000 years are rolling. And you have no word for this. No explanation. No framework. No history of it ever happening before. Just the ground moving and your brain trying to process something it was never built to understand. This is what an earthquake felt like for the first 299,850 years of human history. Not a geological event, not a natural disaster with a name and a magnitude and a news cycle. Just the world breaking its most fundamental promise. The ground stays still. That is the deal. That is the foundation, literally, of everything. And then one day, without warning, it didn't. Let's start with what actually happens to the human brain during an earthquake. In the first seconds, the amygdala fires before any conscious thought is possible. The threat response activates. Adrenaline floods the bloodstream. Time slows. But here is the critical difference between your brain and the brain of someone who lived 50,000 years ago. You have a category for this. Somewhere in your memory, the word earthquake exists. You know what it is. You know it ends. You know the ground will stop moving. That knowledge and that single piece of context is the difference between fear and absolute terror. Ancient humans had no such category. The ground moving was not a known event with a known end. It was the world ending, every time. Now, consider what they did with that. In Japan, the oldest explanation for earthquakes is Namazu, a giant catfish living beneath the earth, restrained by the god Kashima. When Kashima's attention slipped, Namazu thrashed. The ground shook. The mythology is thousands of years old, but its roots reach back further, to a brain desperately trying to build a category for something that had none. If the ground moves like a living thing, then it is a living thing. If something beneath the surface is restless, then something beneath the surface exists. The explanation is wrong by modern standards, but the cognitive move, turning incomprehensible experience into narrative, is not wrong at all. It is exactly what human brains do. It is what they have always done. The Norse believed earthquakes were caused by Loki, a trickster god chained beneath the mountains as punishment, writhing against his bonds. In ancient Greece, Poseidon, god of the sea, carried the title Earthshaker. He struck the ground with his trident when angry. In Incan cosmology, the world rested on the back of a giant being. When it shifted, the earth shook. In ancient India, the world was held up by 8 elephants standing on a turtle. When one grew tired and lowered its head, the ground trembled. 3 continents, 0 contact. The same answer. The earth is alive. Something beneath it is moving, and it is not indifferent to us. This convergence is not coincidence. It is neuroscience. The human brain cannot process agentless catastrophe. It cannot accept that something this enormous, this violent, this personal feeling simply happened with no intention behind it. So it assigns intention. It creates an agent, a catfish, a god, a giant, something that chose to move, something that can, in theory, be reasoned with, appeased, understood. The technical term is agent detection, and ancient humans didn't just use it for earthquakes. They used it for lightning, floods, disease, drought. Any force powerful enough to threaten survival needed an explanation, and the explanation always took the same shape. Someone did this. Someone is behind this. Someone can be asked to stop. In 464 BC, an earthquake destroyed the city of Sparta. Thousands died within minutes. The survivors, searching for an explanation, found one. The earthquake was punishment, divine retribution for the city's treatment of helots, enslaved people who had sought sanctuary in a temple and been dragged out and killed, violating the sacred protection of the gods. The earth had responded. The ground itself had passed judgment. This is what earthquakes did to ancient civilizations. They didn't just kill people. They rewrote morality. They became evidence of divine will, of cosmic justice, of a universe that was paying attention and had opinions about human behavior. An earthquake wasn't just a disaster. It was a message. And this belief had consequences. After the 1755 Lisbon earthquake, one of the deadliest in European history, killing up to 50,000 people and destroying one of the world's great cities, the theological fallout was as significant as the physical destruction. If God allowed this, what kind of God was that? The earthquake didn't just shake the ground. It shook the Enlightenment. Philosophers across Europe used it as evidence that either God was absent, indifferent, or didn't exist at all. One natural event changed the intellectual trajectory of Western civilization. But let's go further back, before philosophy, before cities, before writing. A prehistoric human survives an earthquake. They are standing in the forest when the ground moves. They fall. Trees crack around them. The noise is unlike anything they have heard. A deep subsonic roar that they feel in their chest more than hear with their ears. Then it stops. And they are still alive. What do they do next? They do what humans have always done after surviving something incomprehensible. They tell someone. They find the group and they describe it. With whatever language they have, however limited, they communicate that the earth moved, that it made a sound, that it came from below. They point at the ground. They use their body to show the shaking. And the group listens, because in a world where the ground can move, information about the ground moving is survival information. This is the beginning of oral tradition, the beginning of myth, the beginning of religion, not in some grand civilizational sense, in the most practical possible sense. Something happened that had never happened before. It needed to be remembered. It needed to be passed on. And the only way to pass it on was story. So they made it into a story. In Aboriginal Australian oral traditions, researchers have found accounts of geological events, sea level rises, volcanic eruptions, dramatic landscape changes that date back up to 10,000 years, told as stories. Encoded as myth, preserved across hundreds of generations not in books or databases, but in the memory of a community that understood that some information was too important to lose. Earthquakes didn't just terrify ancient humans, they educated them. The group that remembered the last earthquake, that knew certain valleys shook and certain hillsides cracked and certain rivers changed course, that group survived the next one better than the group that forgot. Memory was survival. Story was memory. Myth was the database. Here is what modern science eventually confirmed. The Earth is alive, not in the way ancient mythology imagined, no catfish, no sleeping giant, but in a way that is, if anything, more extraordinary. Tectonic plates the size of continents drift across a molten interior, colliding and separating over millions of years, building mountain ranges, opening oceans, reshaping the entire surface of the planet in slow motion. The ground moves because the Earth is not finished yet. It has never been finished. It is still becoming something. Ancient humans felt that becoming beneath their feet and had no words for it. So they gave it a face, a name, a will. And in doing so, they preserved the experience across thousands of years until the words finally existed to explain it. You know what an earthquake is. You know plate tectonics. You know fault lines and seismic waves and the Richter scale. You have the explanation they spent 300,000 years waiting for. And yet, the first time you feel the ground move, really move, not a rumble but a full roll, something in your nervous system responds the same way theirs did. The amygdala fires. The adrenaline floods. Time slows. The knowledge is new. The fear is ancient. And for 3 seconds, you are standing in the same place they stood, on ground that has broken its most fundamental promise, in a world that has just reminded you, the way it has always reminded us, that the Earth was here long before you arrived, and it is not done moving yet.